Hi, let's talk freedom. I hope you've listened to the readings, that'd be great. And in addition to this presentation, there is another presentation which is a kind of a bit of a follow up of some of the points if you want to take a look at that. Freedom's been in the news hugely recently. Issues of freedom from racial justice, issues of freedom to protest, whether those protests are in Washington or in Hong Kong or wherever they may be. Freedom from racial injustice all over the world. I mean, very obviously and much in the news from USA right now, but Myanmar, the UK National Health Service, lots and lots of settings in which the freedom from racial injustice is a current and ongoing, and in a way, sort of frustrating theme that it still needs to be as dominant as it is. Freedom from the effects of a virus would be a great freedom, wouldn't it? Freedom from lockdown, which is a term of anti-freedom in one sense, even as much as we need it and have needed it. Many wise things have been said about the business of human freedom because the human spirit longs for freedom. It has an impulse to freedom, but that impulse can be oppressed and it can be smothered and it can become stunted. Bob Marley's song, Redemption Songs, is a wonderful song, has this line in it, liberate yourself from mental slavery. I think it's very profound because mental slavery is so pervasive, so insistent, so effective. There's ever a danger that we begin to believe and accept things which oppress the human spirit. And liberation often has to make a start in our heads and in our hearts. And that's the way, in fact, that the gospel of Jesus works. It works outwards from within in so many respects. An inner transformation the Spirit works on, so that the outward work, which the Spirit also wants to empower, will be effective and related to following Jesus. Um, Paul, writing to the Galatians, was keen on this point, saying, please don't let yourselves be yoked again into slavery. Stand firm. In other words, keep your head on here. Keep your heart in the right place. People are trying to persuade you to a Christianity that is rules based. Please don't buy it. Please, please. You've begun with the Spirit, keep going with the Spirit. It's the Spirit that's the key here. Jesus gave you the Spirit for a good reason. Stick with the Spirit. The rules won't take you to the same place. Nelson Mandela, and another well-known liberation concerned person, came across a quote by him recently that I was impressed by. It's quite well known, I've realised since. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in such a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Mandela's point is a beautifully gospel point, that the whole law is summed up in these simple words: love your neighbour as you love yourself. Mandela's point is, to be free, truly free, is not simply to get rid of your own chains, but to accept that until all are free, none are truly free. And that for you, a true freedom is going to be discovered in a passion for everybody's freedom, because that's actually the gift of God. That's what the human spirit is longing for, and what God's Spirit touches the human spirit to promote. Jesus said, you find this in John chapters 3 and 8, said that those who are born of God's Spirit move in life in ways that others can find unexpected, because God's Spirit is wild and doesn't behave predictably. And those who are born of God's Spirit, therefore, don't necessarily select the same priorities and the same decisions that everybody else is selecting. What he said is that the truth sets you free. And he said, that's what I've come for. And if I set you free, you'll be free. So I was going, okay, let me pay attention to that, because I want to be free. I would understand it if you've come to associate Christianity with restrictions rather than with freedom, because there are streams of Christianity which strongly suggest that, as if Christianity is a collection of thou shalt nots, that you measure your Christian performance by the number of things you don't take part in, the number of things you point the finger at and disapprove of, and so forth. But actually, probably the most misunderstood phrase in the Bible could be thou shalt not. If you're going into a situation where there's heaps of restrictions, but just a handful of things you can do, then whoever's going to instruct you is going to say, here's the handful of things you can do. And don't do anything else, just do these things. Because that list would be shorter and easier to remember. So in the Old Testament, we find some lists of what you're not to do, because that's shorter and easier, because there's not very much. It's just a bit of guidance on self-restraint, really, the exercise of your freedom, being not to make life bad for others, but to exercise your freedom in ways that are good for other people. And thou shalt not simply is opportunities for us to see where a little bit of self-restraint from us will enhance the lives and the freedoms of others. That's broadly how it works. And there's not very much that's thou shalt not. Therefore, that's the short list. Therefore, that's what's given. But in the New Testament, even Paul is saying, but it's not about the rules. It's about the Spirit who leads you into the love of God and the new life in God, and will liberate within your own spirit a heart for the things of God and a desire to live the right life for God and for neighbour and for self. Jesus models this in a kind of silent way, in a sense, by the simple fact that most of his life we know almost nothing about, except for the fact it was very ordinary. And it was the life of a carpenter, the oldest son of the family, eventually inheriting the task of running a small family business, paying the bills and making sure the business took it in the income necessary to balance the books at the end of the month. And managing all that, whether it took him to the building site or a workshop out the back of his house, or whether it took him to the boatyards of Capernaum on the shores of Lake Galilee, wherever he may have used his carpentry skills, and we don't know, it was ordinary, everyday stuff for most of his life. And yet this person who'd run a small business and knew the realities and the practicalities of it down to the finest detail was able to say, you never put profit before people. You never love money. You make money serve love. Otherwise, you're in slavery to money. You can't serve money and God. Whereas if you serve money, it'll keep you prisoner. If you serve God, he'll make you free. So you make money do the work you know that it should do, instead of allowing money to dictate your life, your priorities, and your values. He had lots of stuff to say, just like that. And following Jesus is about getting the hang of that and having the freedom from our society, as he had from his, to question its values and choose different ones. So Jesus lived as an integrated part of his society, as the carpenter of Nazareth, but he also lived in contrast to his society. So he lived with it, as part of it, integrated, but also in contrast. His society also had its prejudices. And those groups that his society held prejudices against were the very people that Jesus would give the most dignity to and the most concern for. And so he models for us this tension of liberation, of being part of the communities into which we are born and which we're going to be part of and to fit in, and yet at the same time, right in the middle of everyday ordinary life, live a counterculture, something different, determined by the spirit of love. It means we have to get on the same page as Jesus, and that's kind of difficult for us to do. At almost the very last moment that the disciples were able to have a conversation with Jesus, as we see in Acts chapter 1, the reading there, they ask him, well, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Two aspects: the timing, knowledge of timing, and the restoration of dominance to Israel, throwing off the Romans and becoming able to dominate their region of the world again. And Jesus' response is quick, to the point, and very searching. Timing, you want knowledge? That would be bad for you to have. I'm not giving you that knowledge. You'll misuse it. So no, you're not going to know when what is going to happen. You're to live faithful, not to make lots of predictions and carry out in the knowledge of what happens next. No, that knowledge belongs to God and to God alone, nobody else. As for power, you want the power that knowledge would bring. That would bring you the wrong power. You're going to get the right power, the power of God's Spirit, the power of love, the power of true liberation, the power of life, the power of truth. God's Spirit is going to empower you to share my love with the world. That's power. The rest isn't really power at all. Remember how, I wonder if you were thinking about this, Isaiah chapter 40, beautiful poetry, in which Isaiah says, oh, don't worry about the political power stuff so much. The people come and go who ruin countries and so forth. They'll be gone tomorrow. So, yeah, be concerned about them because there's injustice, but don't over worry about it. Those who trust in God rather than worry and trust in the princes, those who trust in God, God's Spirit will bear them up on wings like eagles. Beautiful poetical sort of thing there to get your head around. Beautiful image of just being buoyed up on the Spirit of God, the maker of the ends of the earth, into eternity. It's a fantastic image. And of course Jesus did use that prophet, as we saw a couple of weeks ago. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor and announce freedom for the captives. Captivity is created by limits. A prison cell is limiting, lockdown was limiting, poverty is limiting, sickness is limiting, injustice, loneliness, ignorance, they all limit life and they all limit human potential, fear, and even our lifespan itself. Jesus came to address all these. There is no captivity at all that Jesus does not address. He's not come to set us free spiritually without setting us free economically. He's not come to set us free politically without setting us free from death. He's concerned with freedom, truth. He is the truth, the way, and the life. God's Spirit of truth comes to set us free and give us the freedom Jesus came to give us, so that we can become, with Jesus, liberators of everybody else, guided by the Spirit, empowered by the Spirit, who follows from our faith in Christ crucified and risen, and who leads us into the ends of the earth to share the love of God in Christ. May God's Spirit fill you, giving you peace, steering you in the ways that are good, freedom for you, and making you a liberator of others in the ordinary, every day, unless He's called you to something super special. But for most of us, liberators, free in the ordinary everyday. God bless you.